Sir, may I ask you a question?
What's on your mind, Lieutenant?
The Kobayashi Maru, sir. On the test, will you tell me what you did? I would really like to know.
Lieutenant, you are looking at the only Starfleet cadet who ever beat the no-win scenario.
How?
I reprogrammed the simulation so it was possible to rescue the ship.
What?
He cheated.
I changed the conditions of the test. Got a commendation for original thinking. I don't like to lose. I don't believe in the no-win scenario. Kirk to Spock. It's 2 hours. Are you ready?
Right on schedule, Admiral. Just give us your coordinates and we'll beam you aboard.
All right. I don't like to lose.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of ERG Power Talk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip that you were just watching is from the 1982 movie Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. In the clip, Captain James T. Kirk reveals how he beat the no-win scenario known as the Kobayashi Maru test given to all Starfleet officer cadets, and he did it simply by reprogramming the computer parameters so that it was possible for him to win. This act, while controversial, demonstrated his ingenuity and his refusal to accept defeat, reinforcing his character's belief that there's always a way to win, even when it seems impossible. In today's climate of DEI backlash, ERGs that want to help their companies to continue to successfully reach out and draw in women and other candidates from formerly underrepresented groups might just benefit by taking a page out of Kirk's book. So let's face it, most of the old tactics and strategies used to attract diversity to organizations today are really risky. Many are being labeled as discriminatory or politically motivated. Companies are therefore caught in their own version of a Kobayashi Maru no-win scenario. If they fail to demonstrate outreach, they face compliance risk, and if they make any of the old visible efforts, they become a target for lawsuits from the anti-DEI world. So how can you and your ERG help them out of this bind? That's the topic of our discussion for today, and to help us, we have the perfect guest. But before we introduce our guest, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our supporters. This is ERG Power Talk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. The purpose of ERG Power Talk is to provide a virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. With ERG Power Talk, there is no more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference to find great ideas and stimulation toward action. Just subscribe and listen at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters: Atrium Health, Freighter Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Lee Health, National Audubon Society, Tapestry, Oshkosh Corporation, UL Solutions, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. He is co-founder and COO of CultureHQ, where he is reshaping how industry leaders like Microsoft, Comcast, and RTX attract top talent by turning authentic employee stories into powerful branding tools. His journey began at Forrester Research, where he provided clients with data-driven insights to inform high-impact strategic decisions. Recognizing the transformative power of storytelling, he co-founded CultureHQ to revolutionize employer branding, leveraging cutting-edge technology to amplify real employee voices and help organizations build stronger, more compelling cultures.
I'm Jimmy Hall from CultureHQ. I'm the COO and co-founder, and I'm based in the Boston area.
Jimmy, welcome to ERG Power Talk. Let's start with you telling us about your company, what you do, and how you landed where you are.
You mentioned the key word being storytelling, which is really the what our company is predicated on, good storytelling from companies. And we have a platform that helps companies leverage their employees by having the employees create and submit content in the form of videos, in the form of photos, in the form of written text that we call stories. And these nuggets of content can be used by companies for recruiting purposes, can also be used for internal employee connections as well. But we're working with a lot of TA teams that are using these pieces of content for recruiting, and they're putting them on company websites, they're embedding them in careers pages, they're putting them directly on job descriptions. And then there's this social advocacy piece of it as well, where employees can post these pieces of content themselves right on social media. And so this is letting people know what it's really like to work at the company. Who are the employees? This is what the content is really cueing people into, and is able to reach candidates in a really personal, effective way.
You and I have talked about this numerous times, and correct me if I misquote a little bit of your saying, which is that people tend to believe the tenants more than the landlord when they're hunting for an apartment, right? Likewise, people tend today to believe more the employees than they do even the leadership of the organization when they talk about what the culture is like. So this is really quite a powerful tool, I think, because of that. But tell us, in your own words, why you think these visual testimonial statements are so powerful.
Yep. I think you hit the nail on the head with that example. People trust the tenant more than the landlord. It comes down to the power of trust, first and foremost. When you're a candidate looking for a job, or maybe you're not even looking for a job, but you're just coming across content from a company, you are much more likely to trust an employee's voice than to trust a leader's voice or anyone else at the company who you think may be pitching something to you. It's just kind of innate human behavior. So that's why leveraging the employees to kind of be the voice of the company or the spokespeople of the company is so important for companies to utilize. We always talk about that example where, if you were to come into an apartment and you're seeing it for the first time, and you have the broker kind of with you right there, he's trying to pitch to you. He's going to say it's beautiful. He's going to say it's great. The water pipes are great. You can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. And then when you hear from the tenant, you might hear, you know what? The people next door are the loudest people you've ever heard. The trash isn't picked up when it's supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera. And you're getting the real life look at that. And so again, that's just innate human behavior to trust people who are in your shoes or soon to be in your shoes if you're thinking about applying to that company. And then when you talk about visual element and just people's voices, there's this really human element that a company can't really achieve otherwise. So when you think about what companies have done in the past, they've paid, in many cases, millions of dollars for a highly curated marketing video to reach candidates. That was kind of the passe version of this kind of new version of content that employees are sharing. Companies would spend that much money for a highly manicured piece of content, and then it would be kind of obsolete after a few years. You'd have people leave the company would move on to other things, and now they're a few $1 million in the hole, and they can't really update the video, and they're trying to wonder if they should take it down or not. For many years, that was the status quo. Now you have people on social media all the time digesting nuggets of content in 30-second forms, and the appetite for this type of content has really grown. And it's really been fueled a lot by people working from home during COVID times as well. People are just becoming more familiar with quick forms of information that are not the overly manicured piece of video, but it's actually something that somebody holds up their phone or they're looking at their computer like we are today, and they're just filming themselves talking. That has become much more the status quo now. It's much lower lift for the company. It's much cheaper. It's much more easy to replace, to swap in and out for videos. And it's just a really perfect way for a company to leverage its employees.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you said a couple of times there that I think is really important is not overly manicured. You want something that shows some genuineness and authenticness. And the other thing is that you're talking about authentic people or real people that are in the company. I know that now there are a lot of tools out there that basically brag about how they can lower your costs by giving you an AI solution. You can have some kind of avatar that basically you can type in words and it says exactly what you want. But I think that violates that overly manicured rule, doesn't it? And I think also it violates the idea of authenticity, because this is not a real person in your company. And when people find that out, and I'm sure that there are tools out there and that if they don't exist now, they will, where they can easily discover that this is not genuine, that probably will have a negative effect. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really interesting thing. And there's a big irony in that, in trying to present your company as really authentic and considering using an AI avatar to do it. It's just, at At bottom line is it's very ironic. My thought on that is that there is a real place for this human personal element, and it needs to exist in this employer branding space, which is the space we're operating in here. The personal human element can only come from employees. They're going to tell it like it is. They're going to be the real people doing the videos. And like you said, once somebody starts using avatars or fake videos or what have you, and they're outed, they've lost all credibility, and it's going to backfire in a huge way. So the risk that companies run on that is huge. And like I said, this isn't rocket science to do it the real way and roll up your sleeves a little bit and get videos from employees. It's accessible to every company, if they want to flip the switch and choose to do that. So, it's not really worth the risk of thinking about AI. But, with our growing company, we've thought a lot about how AI should work with our platform or should be part of our platform. And what we've done so far is we've used AI to help basically guide people a little bit, or at least give them tips and tricks as far as the types of things they should be sharing. So if we have an administrator who's looking to capture information about what somebody's workday is like, they type that in as a theme, and the AI will give them a few questions they can ask that would get at the different elements of someone's workday. So we're using AI in kind of informative ways, but we're not using it for actual video creation itself.
So you're using the AI as an augmentation or as a support for the human, but not as a replacement for the human. Mm-hmm. And when you think about using AI to make your company look authentic and like it has a good culture and everything, that's teched up version of what people used to do years ago when they had all these stock photos of, say, for example, a really diverse team. And if you were looking through the internet, you'd see certain people and you'd say like, wow, that guy works for multiple companies, right? It didn't take long to figure out that these were all like stock photos. And it does have a chilling effect if you're trying to build a positive brand. So Jimmy, how do you get people to provide on-camera testimonials without over-scripting them? What is it that you do to get somebody to authentically present how they feel about their organization in a way that conveys a message and at the same time is not overly manicured or scripted?
A lot of my job as the customer success and COO is really helping administrators at companies, like branding leaders, leverage or capture and leverage the content from employees. So we have people on site, we have branding leaders who are reaching out to their colleagues to capture the stories. I think the big thing is just being upfront with people about what's expected here and making sure that these videos are short and they're authentic, meaning that they don't have to be overly polished. So you don't have to get the wording just right. And in many cases, if it's a tiny bit off or if it just makes it more human. We talked about it not being overly manicured. And I think from a branding leader perspective, when you communicate that to an employee that you don't have to be perfect here, less is more sometimes, it puts them at ease a little bit. But you communicate, I want you to talk about this topic and it has to only be 30 to 45 seconds. It helps them kind of ease into it a little bit. I think the other thing is just thinking about branding as really a kind of a longer term game. This is a game that is not just quick hit and just get the information and now you have everything you need for the next year or two. This is an ongoing thing. And in that vein, what you can do is reach out to people and kind of start with the low-hanging fruit. So rather than ask them the most difficult question that you want them to talk about up front, ask them a little bit more about themselves. What was it like growing up? What was your first job that you had? How did you get to the role that you are in your company today? And just get them kind of comfortable talking about themselves. And I will say that some of these more personal questions or kind of tangential questions about work can actually be really, really helpful, because one of the real key things I want to stress on the meeting today with you, Joe, is that people need to come across as human in a way that is outside of work in addition to inside of work. So these personal stories about what do you do in your free time? You do yoga, you go for runs to kind of detox during the weekends. These things can be as important as talking about your job and your responsibilities. Why? Because candidates who are looking at that can connect with those people. They can say, I like to run. I like to do yoga. There are people like me who work at this company. I would belong here. And that's ultimately what you're trying to get to. I would belong here. I would fit in, is what you want every candidate to think when that person sees a video or when they hear from an employee. So the best way to do that is kind of painting a whole picture, a holistic picture of an employee, not just saying, I like my job here and here's what I do day to day, but it's getting someone to really talk about themselves and allowing a candidate to connect with people on more of a personal level.
I love that connection of the human and of their interest in addition to the job. That certainly is something that makes other people connect better because they see those similarities. And we're going to talk a little more about that, how that ability to convey that, hey, you can belong here because there are people like you that belong here. We're going to talk about that a little more as we go deeper into this discussion. One of the things that I wanted to explore with you is there are people out there who could just turn on a camera phone and start talking. But some people have a reluctance to doing that. I'm sure that that's one of the factors that keeps people from giving video testimonials. But are there others? And generally, how do you and your team overcome those obstacles?
It's a really good question because people can be hesitant to provide testimonials, and also branding leaders can be hesitant to even start programs because they don't feel that their employees are ready to contribute. The big thing we have seen is the power of example. So we talked about setting expectations, keeping things short, keeping them concise, and not overly polished as something that makes it more approachable for an employee. But the big thing you need to do as well is get a few videos done and demonstrate to an employee what you're looking for, and give them kind of this FOMO or this fear of missing out because their other colleagues are contributing. So when we work with branding leaders, we say, okay, if you're trying to get information, you're trying to get pieces of content for this particular topic, why don't you go to one or two friends that you know at the company first, get one or two videos, and then say to the next person that you're looking to grab information from, say, we'd love for you to join these people. We'd love for you to add on to the content we already have. No one wants to be the first one to do something. It's just kind of human nature. They don't want to feel vulnerable like that. So the power of example can go a really long way in kind of getting that snowball effect going. And sometimes it means reaching out to the person right next to you to kind of get things started. I think that's a really important aspect of it. The example part of it, if you really need to at the end of the day, you can also start to gamify things a little bit and say, we'll give you some company swag, or just kind of keep it on the branding level. We'll give you company swag because you're going to represent the company in this branding sense. So it's kind of relevant to do that, but maybe give someone some small prizes just to start off. I know it sounds a little bit funny, but depending on the nature of the company, people can be used to that at a company, and it may make sense to think about it. And the other thing we do with companies is we work with some companies that set up real ambassador programs where they have 20 to 25 people who really raise their hand and say, I want to be an ambassador at the company here and be part of this branding effort in an ongoing way. And then these people can be leveraged over a longer period of time. They can come together as a group and share ideas, kind of hold each other accountable in a subtle way as well. And you can also set deadlines with these people by way of these meetings. So you can have these check-ins and keep people accountable. But deadlines is a part of it as well. I think every time you reach out to someone and say, we're doing this initiative for 2 weeks. We'd love for you to submit your video by next Friday, kind of thing. I think that's a big part of it, just keeping people honest.
When you were talking about the ambassadors, one of the things that occurred to me is that in the work that you do, you probably get to use the same people more than once, right? Because you can ask a question about some aspect of their life and work, and they can answer that, and that becomes like your 1 minute, 2 minute video. And then you can go back to the same person. So it's not like one and done. You can leverage that group of ambassadors over the course of a period of time, multiple times. Is that correct?
It's definitely correct. We're talking about the holistic self. Everybody has a lot of things that they're able to speak about if they so choose. I think the ambassador group is tremendous. It is a double-edged sword in the sense that the more you go to these people, the more the more the other people fall into the background a little bit sometimes. So, I think there's a lot of value in getting as many voices heard at the company, or hearing from as many voices as you can from different people and going to all the corners of the company. But there are going to be those people who are already very comfortable on camera, who are already posting on social media about themselves and their work a lot. And these people are just great resources. I think there's a place for both. I think there's a place for the people who are going to contribute weekly or biweekly, and there's a place for the people who are going to contribute just one and done. If they have a valuable story to say, then getting one nugget of information from them in a video is all you might need from them. But I think there's value in both. And I think that everyone should make the effort to try to reach out to those pockets of the company that you haven't heard from yet, because there's a lot of value in it.
And I guess you can refresh those ambassador groups, right? You can have people who serve as an ambassador for a period of time, and then later on you can get other ambassadors to come in, again, to your point, so that you don't overwear or overburden any one individual. Okay, so here's what I learned in the first half of my discussion with Jimmy about why employee video testimonials are so powerful. 1, people trust employees more than corporate leadership messaging. Tons of articles show that after years of falling into the smoke and mirror traps, today's workforce is not as gullible as the workforce of their parents' generations. They do, however, trust others who they deem to be more like themselves. So use real employee stories to showcase your organization's culture, and you'll attract more talent with authenticity. 2, in creating employee testimonial videos, avoid over-engineering them. Don't try to create one of those overly polished corporate videos that no one takes seriously anymore. Candid, real-life employee testimonials resonate more with candidates and build greater trust. 3, the way people consume content today has evolved. Short-form, user-generated content on social platforms is much more engaging than expensive, long-form productions. So aim for a minute and keep the message sincere and keep it concise. 4, avoid like the plague using AI-generated avatars to promote your employee culture. While AI may be useful in helping prepare for creating an employee video, it should not be used to replace people. Imagine how ironic it is that a company that wants to tout its employees' perception of their culture and workplace turns to such a deceptive and disingenuous way of communication. If anything, the use of AI like this confirms people's distrust of the organization and its leadership as either A, being too cheap to invest in authenticity, or B, not being able to find one single employee with something nice to say about working in their company. And finally, 5, it may go without saying at this point, but it's really important to make sure that we include human elements of our employees in creating these compelling, inclusive video narratives that attract talent. Hobbies, family, pets, these are all things that we should talk about as well, because they humanize us and they should be part of the story captured in these videos. In the next half of our discussion with Jimmy, we will explore how you and your ERGs can help your companies by using video storytelling to let potential hires across all dimensions of diversity see and feel your company's diversity and inclusive culture. All of this and more when we come back, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable you to 1, set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2, distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3, communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4, secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5, fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge workshops. Supercharge workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular popular Supercharge Your ERGs book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Supercharge Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. I'm going to pivot a little bit now to attracting people to your company from a diverse workforce and how ERGs can help the organization do that. Because as I mentioned before, companies are in a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation right now. And I think that video testimonial technology is one of the ways that ERGs can help organizations get out of that bind. This is something that you and I have tossed around a couple of times, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how this technology and this approach can be used as a way to send out a message of attraction, welcome, and so forth to a very broad population of people without having to make any overt statements about any particular group of people that you're looking for.
Yeah. That's a good point, Joe. I think the ERG members and the ERG groups, generally speaking, are just perfect candidates to find value in this type of branding approach. It's because these people tend to be passionate people. They tend to be deeply embedded with the organization. They tend to be great spokespeople in general, and they tend to be more willing than the average person to contribute to the company and to their efforts in this type of branding way. I think the ERGs, like you're saying, it's an interesting time in the industry right now, just as far as how ERGs are presenting themselves or thinking about presenting themselves during these last few months, as we've seen. Some people are even retracting types of things on web pages. Some people are trying to add more, but with a different message or a different tone. I think the interesting thing we've seen is, how do ERGs present themselves historically to the outside world? If you go to a company's webpage, you're going to see, in many cases, a list of all the ERGs, right? We have 8 ERGs here, and here they are, bullet, bullet, bullet. Maybe there's some photos. You're talking about those stock photos. Sometimes you get that. Sometimes you get stock-like looking photos, but actual employees at the company. There's not something very dynamic or engaging at all with that. So that's kind of what's historically been happening. When you talk about enlivening the content from ERGs and bringing this stuff to life to get a candidate excited about people at the company, these video testimonials are an incredible way to do it. It's just such a next level, visual, dynamic, stimulating approach to a candidate that it goes a very long way. And I think the interesting thing is that we talk about the idea of show, don't tell as being one of our mantras that we try to really impart on our clients. Instead of just looking at the camera and talking more about what you're doing here, you can also turn the camera away from you and demonstrate or show what's happening. The cool thing about ERGs is that they tend to do a lot of programs. They tend to do things that are visually stimulating, whether it's roundtables, whether it's volunteering. It's things that you can really showcase visually in a powerful way. We had a client where it was during Hispanic Heritage Month. The Hispanic ERG actually brought in salsa teachers to teach more about, like, dance instructors to teach them how to do salsa dancing. And the client we were working with, this leader at the ERG, she posted a before and after. There was a video of them receiving the instruction, trying to do the footwork, and then there was an after when they kind of had it down pat a little bit, and they were doing they were doing this salsa dancing. The music was going, and it was just like the coolest thing to see the transition there. And she's not saying, we're an amazing Hispanic ERG, we do all these programs. All she did was showcase, here's what we did. And she just let people tap into the positivity, the creativity, and kind of the energy of that video. And it spoke for itself. So it was again, a case of show, don't tell. So I encourage people, when you think about these videos, is when you can, turn the camera away from you in order to demonstrate something very visual and exciting that you want to share with the outside world.
That is a show and don't tell approach. And also, even in a straightforward 1 minute video where the parameters are the same as the ones that you mentioned before, where someone is talking about how they like to run or whatever hobbies they have and work in the company, by tapping into the different community groups in the organization that are found in these ERGs, you're going to get a variety of people from different backgrounds. And as a result of that, somebody looking at that video will see themselves. I'm like that person in a lot of ways, in addition to maybe sharing some of their hobbies. And clearly, that person seems to be doing well there. That seems like a kind of place where I would be welcomed as well. So even something as simple as that, or something like what you just talked about, which is turning the camera around and showing activities or things that are going on, and then letting the viewer complete the story in their head about what that means in terms of the organization's culture, instead of telling them or doing that bullet, just letting them see it and letting the viewer reach their conclusions about the company culture. That's pretty powerful. So Jimmy, how many video testimonials does the average company have, and how would you allocate or send these subtle messages out to welcome a diverse workforce?
I think it's very hard to pinpoint the average number or the proper number of videos. I always think the higher the volume you can collect of videos and testimonials, the better. Because as I said, this is a long-term play. You want to have things in your back pocket for the long term. You want to keep things visual. You want to keep things kind of constant with your posts if you can. The nice thing about it is that if a candidate comes in today and sees or goes to your website today and they see a video that was created last week, versus if they come in 6 months from now and they see that video that's now 6 months old, the candidate has no way of really knowing that that's an old video. It's still going to be as fresh as it is to those eyes as it was to the people today. And I think that's a really important thing. So the more that you can leverage, for later on down the road, so you can keep a little repository, I think the better. I'm saying less is more, but sometimes more is more in terms of volume for what we're working with here as far as actual testimonials and branding. As far as presenting the diversity of your company to the outside world, I think the important thing when you think about the long-term strategy is you have to be careful not to front load everything. If you're trying to stress the importance of diversity, don't promote all of your videos in the first month and not think about this in a long-term way. But you can kind of stagger those things if you are looking at people of color or ERGs or whatever you're trying to really promote to convey that message. Try to think about it in a more staggered way, so that people can kind of get these quick hits over time. Because again, this is branding. You're building a brand image. It doesn't happen overnight. And you need to kind of keep a consistency to it as much as possible. And like I said, hopefully you're able to leverage and snowball more and more on top of each other as you go down the road in that kind of long-term strategy. So I think those are the kind of the main things right there as far as how we think about that. I think you also mentioned the idea of having subtle messages. And I think that's becoming more important right now. You don't have to overtly say, I'm part of this ERG and it's a huge part of my work experience, and really kind of, beat the dead horse a little bit. I think if you say, I'm in this role, I'm happy here, I'm part of this ERG, and I've been here for 5 years and I've, been promoted 3 times. And here's what I do day to day. Like that's very powerful. It's subtle, but it shows that if you are a person that I can connect with, that resonates with me, and you're happy here and you're also being successful, then that's all I really need to know. It's a subtle message, but it's conveying a lot, rather than having to kind of beat the dead horse and say, this is a very diverse company and they care about me. There's other ways to say it that are more subtle and a little bit more natural.
Absolutely. Jimmy, what about when someone leaves the organization after filming one of these videos? Can the organization keep using it, or do they need to replace it?
We've been working with clients long enough that that's come up a lot. And like you said, sometimes we have ambassadors who've contributed a lot of content and then they leave the company or they find another role. We always encourage people, and we've seen leaders naturally taking down that old content. If it's been posted, it has served its place. Obviously, it would continue to be valuable in the long term, like we talked about, but it's in the company's best interest to replace that with something fresh and new. And the nice thing about these pieces of content, like we talked about, is they're casual enough and they're low lift enough that you should be able to get more content and replace it in a fairly readily way. There are your big, strong ambassador leaders, like I mentioned, that can be a little bit harder to replace, but it's in your best interest as a leader to not make yourself vulnerable by having people come in and talk about the one video you saw or that they saw from this person, and you say, oh, that person's not here. It would have been nice for you to work with them, but they're actually not here anymore at the company. You don't want to be involved in those kinds of vulnerable interactions. Right. So we've seen our clients taking stuff down like that. But like I said, these videos are, the quantity of them is enough that you should be able to replace those, and look to do that when people do leave.
A lot of organizations like to convey diversity in leadership, but again, it's generally done in bullets, and there are these pictures shown of people and some information about them on biography pages. But I would imagine that if you've got diversity in your leadership group, that it probably is pretty powerful to have some of those leaders do videos and post those. What do you think of that idea in general, Jimmy?
I think that's absolutely huge. And the reason is not only because you can communicate diversity in leadership in a very in-your-face way that can be very beneficial, but people are just not used to seeing casual videos from leadership. They're just not used to it. When you think about manicured videos, you're thinking about, the leadership voices and the heads, the talking heads of the leaders with like the $2 million marketing video, almost like a movie trailer, that's very low trust stuff these days. I mean, the trust for that is just very low. So if you have a leader who's going to be doing it in a casual way, who's actually filming almost like selfie style video or looking at the computer and filming a very casual message, that's going to go so far, and it's going to communicate that this is like an organization where people are real, and that's going to be very welcoming and inviting to me. So I think a resounding yes to trying to get leadership involved as much as possible, even regardless of what the diversity is. You want to hear from these leader voices. I mean, that has to be part of your branding as much as you're able to do it. If you have diversity there that you can then communicate, I mean, then it makes it even 10 times more powerful. But leadership needs to be involved as much as you're able to do it and as much as they're willing to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes a person's full dimensions of a person and what makes a person who they are not immediately visible in one of these bio photos that talk about what school they went to, what jobs they had before. But when you hear them speak, you learn some really interesting things about people. And sometimes you realize that you have more in common with them, even if they may be different in other ways. So that's another way of connecting with potential job candidates across the entire spectrum, because there's more to people a lot of times than meets the eye in terms of a flat two-dimensional picture. And that usually tends to come across more when they're authentically talking about themselves, who they are and their organization and their own backgrounds. So again, as you put it, that's pretty powerful stuff. What resources do you recommend to listeners of the program who want to learn more about using powerful videos to keep that welcome mat out without making statements that can be used to put the organization in a tight spot? What are some places that people can go to get more information about this approach?
I think we talked about this being such an interesting, sensitive time that I think the best thing to do is to actually go to company career sites, to company about us pages, and see how people are presenting themselves now, because this is a bit of a transition time for sure. We talked about people kind of displaying new messages, people who are refining messages as far as how they're presenting themselves in a branding way. And I think if you were to go onto these company websites and kind of get a sense for those things, you can see what resonates with you. You can see where you feel the company may be vulnerable or not. So I think that's probably the best thing to do right now, is kind of go to the primary source, being the company itself, even on job descriptions as well. How are companies presenting themselves right now, and how are they differing from one another? But this is the employer branding space and the social advocacy space. So those are the key words really to search. And like we said, because it's a changing time, you're going to see news articles and things coming up. I don't think there's a real definitive resource right now that's demonstrating the best way to do it in an academic way. Here's what you should be doing at this particular time. So that's why I think going right to the source is interesting. But employer branding and social advocacy are those key words if you want to look up pieces of news, or if you want to look up kind of best practices that people are currently publishing as the time continues to be one of transition for many companies.
And I would imagine looking at your page and the way that you're trying to attract candidates and looking at some competitors and seeing what they're doing, that might yield some interesting insights as well. Mm-hmm. So, Jimmy, how can our listeners reach you, reach your organization, learn more about what all of you do, and how they can get in touch with you?
Our company is CultureHQ, and the website is culturehq.com. My name is Jimmy Hall, and you can reach me at jimmy@culturehq.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. And based in Boston, if you ever want to meet up and find yourself here in the area. But our company has a platform that helps collect the content, review it, edit it, and then publish it on those web pages and on social. So that's kind of the vehicle that we're working with from our software perspective. But we're just very grateful to be in this space. It is a space of transition. Diversity and inclusion is a huge part of that. There's a lot of elements to this branding space, but it's a very interesting time to be in here. And we've had quite a journey so far. And I will say also that there's a lot of internal benefit from these pieces of content too. You're helping to recruit people certainly with this messaging, but you're also helping to kind of bolster connections at companies. There are still companies who are fully virtual. There are still companies taking hybrid approaches. And then every time you're able to see your colleagues in these visual ways, or to learn more about an ERG that maybe you didn't know was there, if you're at a big company, or maybe you were involved in it a few years ago and now there's a big update and you get to see that as a colleague and maybe meet some of your peers that way. That's a very powerful tool as well. So you have this kind of secondary, culture building, employee engagement building element to these pieces of content. So it's a great thing to kind of lean into if you're not doing any branding yet. And it has a lot of really positive ramifications if you can do it in a good way.
Yeah, that is all fantastic. Jimmy, thanks again for joining us today on ERG Power Talk. I always enjoy talking to you, and I think that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this program.
Thank you so much, Joe. Pleased to be here.
Here's what I learned in the second half of my discussion with Jimmy about how ERGs can leverage video storytelling to support their organizations. 1, step up and represent your company's inclusive culture by providing video testimonials that will showcase you as one of the real people with real experiences in that company. 2, when running events, turn the camera around and show the energy, the community, and the impact of what your ERG is doing. Capture those real moments, whether it's a mentoring session, a volunteer event, or a cultural celebration. Let the visual do the talking for you. 3, a strong mix of ERG members and video testimonials ensures that potential hires can connect with someone who shares their social dimension, experiences, interests, or career aspirations. 4, video testimonials don't have to be one-time promotions. Build a repository of authentic ERG-driven content that you can use over time. A video film today will still be relevant 6 months from now to a candidate exploring your company for the first time. 5, avoid front-loading all your video testimonials at once. Instead, release them gradually to create a consistent and evolving image. Regular content updates ensure that potential candidates continuously see fresh, relevant, and engaging messages. And finally, 6, remember, you don't need to overly declare how diverse you are or how inclusive your company is. A simple video of a variety of members from your groups talking about their interests, their role, their career growth, and their sense of belonging speaks volumes. Let candidates naturally absorb the message that your company values diversity and supports employee success inclusively. In 1972, the Apollo 17 crew captured what came to be known as the blue marble photograph. It's a breathtaking image of Earth as seen, fully illuminated from space, taken from about 18,000 miles away. It showed our planet as a vibrant, unified sphere with swirling clouds, deep blue oceans, and vast continents without any borders. This striking visual reshaped how people viewed the world, emphasizing its fragility and our connectedness. The image became the catalyst for environmental awareness and global unity, proving that seeing and feeling the reality of our planet's beauty and vulnerability is far more impactful than simply reading or hearing about it. Likewise, ERGs can help their companies break free from their current outreach bind by providing a window for those outside to see inside the organization. ERGs can fuel authentic storytelling through video testimonials, event highlights, and real employee experiences that make their workplace culture's diversity and inclusiveness visible and tangible in a powerful way. I invite you and your ERGs to lead the way. Thank you for tuning in to ERG Power Talk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG Symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge Your ERGs, 18 Tips to Power Up Your ERG/BRG Strategy, and the new DEI and ERG Frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.